very different perception of the two, and that creates a heightened sense of shame in the women. Now, I found through the years as a counselor that men will fairly readily come into my office and will write on an intake form their problem is pornography or sexual addiction. The women will rarely write that. I think I've had 2 who have been willing to do that in all these years. And you typically find out about it when they're struggling with something else. But the women are not necessarily going to present the same way as men, and they may have some consequences that are different. Men don't deal with an unwanted pregnancy. Men don't deal with post-abortion syndrome or something like that. And so these are some of the things that you're going to find when dealing with women who are sexually addicted. And these are just some of the things I've listed here in terms of how they might present. The one at the end I'm going to mention is the love and romance addiction. We are finding that does tend to take place, that by the way also takes place with men. But in terms of the women, probably 35, 40 and over will still tend to veer more towards that. The younger women, though, I would say in the 15 to 35 age range, we're finding are just as visually stimulated as men. And culture is rewiring women's brains, and as they've grown up in this sexually saturated culture, they're being conditioned to respond more to the visual stimuli that's out there. The other thing I'll mention with women is eating disorders can be very prevalent. I remember the last female addicts group we did, half of the women in there also had either anorexia or bulimia. And so that can be a co-occurring condition that we watch for as well. Some of the things that are rather scary about women who are acting out on the internet is that 80% of female cybersex addicts will actually go meet the men that they interact with in chat rooms in a real-life situation. And we had one many years ago from right here in the suburb in which we're all seated, who was very much a typical upper middle class housewife, would get her husband off to work, kids off to school in the morning, and then she would be in the chat rooms and would go meet men for sex that she met online. And what finally broke her was one day she went to a hotel down near the airport, and when this man got to the room, he was not what he had presented himself. He weighed about 400 pounds and came in drunk, and she was like, "I don't want to be with you." And he just said, "Too late, I already bought a plane ticket." And he proceeded to rape her repeatedly and beat her within an inch of her life. And that was what it took to bring her to a point where she was willing to seek help. So women will present with those types of things. They very much are struggling with internet pornography today, especially the younger ones. And the women do tend to favor the chat rooms more than men. 1 out of 3 visitors to adult websites are female. Estimates are that 9.4 million women are accessing pornography each month, and 13% of women in surveys recently have been admitting to accessing pornography at work. And so this is not just a problem for men, it is a problem for women as well. Sexual addiction in children, we've already touched on a little bit. But as you're working with families, just be very aware that kids are being exposed at earlier ages. The techniques of pornographers are specifically aimed at attracting children. There's a major Disney character out there, and I hesitate to give the name on tape because I don't want to give somebody a place to go act out. But you take that particular princess, put her name in with a .com, and it takes you to a porn site. Well, that's not aimed at an adult. That's aimed at my daughters. That's aimed at your daughters. That's aimed at attracting little girls. They're the ones who are most likely to go there. Until just recently, if a child was doing a book report for school on the White House and they were to go to whitehouse.com, it would take them to a porn site. Now that has recently been changed. The president's address is whitehouse.gov. But that's the type of thing that would happen, and then the kid is hooked and mousetrapped into a website. A popular technique that pornographers have used is to take a child's website, let's just as an example, say cartoonnetwork.com, they'll change the N to an M, and then when the child has a typo, they're in a porn site. And years ago, I know the FCC was shutting down dozens of these things every month. But just be aware that this stuff is now being aimed at children as well. Now the internet has definitely changed the face of pornography. If you think about it, for those of us who are in this room, if we wanted to see something pornographic when we were kids, You had to buy it, sneak it, steal it, find it, go hide with it, or something like that. But with the internet, instantaneous. It's just like that. And the quicker the high, the more lethal the drug. We know that with things like cocaine, crack cocaine. And so the internet has allowed us a way to bring it into the privacy of our homes and to create that high a lot quicker. But pornography has experienced an evolution from still pictures that got more graphic on up to the invention of the VCR. And then now with the internet, you have live action sex brought into you in digital imagery. And the problem is only going to get worse. As digital technology improves, as the ways to transmit technology improve, this is a problem that's going to get worse. And the pornography industry has actually been behind a lot of the development of technology for the internet. Some used to call it the AAA engine. I would call it the AA engine. People used to say it's anonymous, affordable, and available. There's nothing anonymous about the internet. That's a myth that people buy into. But I have seen reports that have been out of sting operations. As soon as you log on, it can be traced. Advertisers do it, and there is nothing anonymous about going online. But it's affordable and it's available and very easily accessible. These ladies you will probably recognize. These are the Sex and the Cities ladies. And in so many ways they have become a symbol of our culture. One of their quotes was, "Why can't women have sex like men?" And yeah, in many ways that is what the show was about. But we're hit with this massive stimulation to where if you look at this picture, this in many ways describes the culture and the context in which we live. With all of this stuff thrown at you. You know, Kindles, MySpace, you know, loud music, Facebook. There are all kinds of ways today to not have to sit down face to face with somebody and have a conversation. Yeah, it used to be if you couldn't get someone on the phone, you know, you didn't have an email to send them. But now there are so many ways to avoid building relationship and building connection that this is one of the things that really, as a culture, we don't do relational things very well anymore in this country. And so getting to where we bring that back, that's one of the things that people, I believe, are craving when they're trying to act out sexually. Some of the stats, just real quick. Viewing sexual stimuli is the #1 sexual activity in the United States. 1 in 4 regular internet users is visiting a sex site each month. We've talked about already the impact on corporate America. 2 out of 3 companies have had to discipline employees for viewing porn at work. And a lot of people don't realize that the company they work for owns their internet access. They own their email. You send something through that company's server, that company can go back and pull it up at any time. And a lot of people think it's anonymous, and it's not. First time I ever did this lecture, this stat was $12 billion. Today it is $55 billion. Is now spent annually on porn, and that is more than the combined revenue of professional football, baseball, basketball, and hockey combined. And so that is the level economically of an industry that we're looking at when we talk about porn. The Playboy and Penthouse circulation exceeds Time and Newsweek. Be careful with some of these statistics. There's a book out there called How to Lie with Statistics, and I question how some of these numbers actually come up. This next one I want to mention is something we came up with in doing a program for grades 6 through 12 at a church. And that's that the average teenager in America is now exposed to over 20,000 sexual references and images per year. That average is 54.8 per day. Now I dare say that most of us sitting in this room tonight, who like me are well over the age of 30, we aren't going to point to anybody, I promise, but yeah, I don't think any of us in this room were exposed to 54.8 a day growing up. And that's the world our children are growing up.